Just keep providing free value for months on, years on, and the right people eventually buy. This sounds like the perfect advice you will hear from marketing gurus in the past 20-25 years, except that it misses the nuance, it's overgeneralized, it has been regurgitated for the past 20 years while the online space has changed, and it's only true if we truly understand what the actual fuck that free value is. And holding on to this belief as a purpose-driven, impact-led entrepreneur, coach, mentor, guide will help you keep pumping out content after content, provide free value for months or even years on, not seeing a significant increase or even any increase in your income, how consistently you're able to convert soul-aligned clients that you love working with, and the impact your business is making. Back when I was in the language learning space, and I talk a lot more about this in an earlier video, I was there as someone who felt like I had this purpose to help other people with what was something that came easier for me, learning languages. And I considered myself to be heart-centered, so I constantly posted like 3-5 times a day, short form videos, created even long form videos, despite every bone of mine telling me not to do that because I was so afraid of being on camera. And guess what happened after a year and a half of consistently doing it? The money I had saved while I was working in Japan during COVID, before I took the leap of faith and just started entrepreneurship full time, slowly started to disappear from my account. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out how come. I knew how incredibly transformational and powerful my paid classes were. I was considered an authority. People kept inviting me on lives, on podcasts. I talked about how to improve communication skills when you're learning a foreign language. Despite all the free value, I was so desperate, sometimes I created 5-7 pieces of content every single day, sent out 2-3 weekly emails. How come my following was growing? People were telling me how helpful my content was, and I could barely scrape by. And I was honestly starting to hate creating content. My content has been missing this one crucial ingredient that I don't see a lot of people talk about, honestly, that would have made it valuable for a potential buyer. So I could have actually started to run a sustainable, impactful business. And I'm saying valuable because the content was valuable to someone who was just keeping on scrolling. It gave them the dopamine hit for the validation, the little tip, the inspiration that they got. But to someone out there who already wanted that solution, that successful interview because they are not feeling nervous about speaking a foreign language, or building a new life in a new country because the language barrier is no longer a barrier, all of that, me yapping about the problems, was simply a disservice. Because the reason the 3-5% of our audience who actually wants the results, and they are actually serious about getting the results, they aren't stuck because they haven't tried. They aren't stuck because of the lack of information, because we haven't provided enough value, enough inspiration yet. Come on, I've been bending over backwards, providing value, emails, all kinds of things for a year and a half. The issue was that they had deeply held misconceptions, myths, and beliefs that my content never asked them to question. And here's the truth about what got me from considering shutting it all down in 2022 and just going back to something I really didn't want, back to a school and just teaching the way they tell me how to teach, to making it to my first $5,000 months. If your content doesn't dismantle, crack holes in the beliefs that are currently running the show for them, that resistance will still be there and play into how they will still say no to the transformation and the change. If you don't remove that resistance, because so many people are telling you to just like add more value, give people more, do a lot of the stuff instead of helping them let stuff go. And if your content and if your messaging doesn't remove that resistance, because everybody's telling you to just like add more value, give them more, just educate them more about the things that they are already overwhelmed of hearing more about, what they need is to let go of what no longer serves them. You and your content aren't creating the conditions that would lead them to the next step and buy. And this is the exact gap that I see on almost any social media platform with any of the transformational coaches, mentors, or guides who ever came to me for help. The reason every transformation entrepreneur and their mom keeps on scrambling for likes and engagement, but struggles to get consistent clients, make sure that that revenue is actually becoming consistent, like 5K, 10K, 20K months, is because their content, even though it provides an immense amount of free value, doesn't create decision events. And by this, I don't mean, we are supposed to like shove our offers all the time into our content and make every single video a sales pitch. A buying decision can simply be just as subtle as, if you want to find out more about this, download this free resource, sign up to my newsletter, where next week I'm going to share a piece on one of the most important tools that my students use to overcome this or that problem. Get my 27 euro secret podcast, where you'll be guided through the exact processes that my students use and why they are so important for you to start implementing, through 8 episodes. Or even as direct as book a call with me, or comment the word call and I'll send you the booking link. The key is that those micro decisions, because so much of how we go about our lives, how we consume content, check out somebody's free videos, free value, is based on our subconscious beliefs, what we care about, what values we have, whose mission we want to stand behind, the solutions we are looking for, the pain we want to avoid. The reality is, if your content doesn't create these micro decisions or incentivize these micro decisions, the reality is, if your content doesn't invite these decisions, your ideal client, someone on the other side of the screen consuming your content, who already wants what you have, they would already have the money, the commitment to buy the transformation, is just going to keep sitting in their problem, thinking that the solution is just to check out your content tomorrow, the day after, and a week after. And that's what happened in the language learning space. People were just sitting in the comfort of my free content. There wasn't anything external that kind of forced them into finally taking courage and speaking while they were still making mistakes, something that used to terrify them. They were nodding along, they were saying, oh, this is something I need to save, come back to, because this was so valuable. And because my content never brought them to a definitive fork at their path. They eventually got desperate enough to buy, and many times, if I look at the language learning space, people who were not competent language teachers. So by not engineering decisions in your content, you're essentially selling your people who don't want to wait for you to like open up the doors, from someone else who shows up and does what the rest of this video is about. Someone who may just have a quarter of your expertise and wisdom, a fraction of your caring heart, and maybe even a completely misleading, misaligned approach that gets client after client burned. All because that person did something no one else does in the space. They gave the right people a clear, undeniable opportunity to decide. So when you don't engineer these decision moments, you're not just hurting your revenue, you're actually failing the very people who need you the most, because you're focused so much on pouring your heart and soul into creating the next best, high quality, resonating content full of depth, forgetting people who already want to commit and they have the means to invest in themselves, in the transformation that only you can provide, need you and that energy. So providing free value consistently while you're still waiting for someone to show up and say, how can I buy from you, without you engineering these decision moments, isn't heart-centered. It's self-centered. Ouch. I know. That is the truth that I had to face about 3 years ago when everything changed. Because that stings a little, but it's the truth, our own bullshit, that many times we have to face if we want to build a real, impactful, and sustainable coaching business. Not just in terms of the revenue we generate, the impact we make, but also how comfortable we feel about how we create that life and that business within it. So what does it actually look like to create content that gets the right people into our DMs, potential buyers inquiring about how they could work with us, clicking the links and booking the calls? It means you stop creating content that looks like, positions itself as a swamp, and you start building a safe path across that dangerous river that they are now unwilling to jump across to the other side, the solution. Because there's one truth that I'm sure you know about what keeps your people stuck. It's that they much rather choose a familiar hell, their current comfort zone, than the unfamiliar heaven. And this is something I talked about earlier, the authenticity trap, thinking that somehow we just get to say whatever we want and people will magically convert into clients, something I talked about in an earlier video. Because their subconscious beliefs, the actual drivers of their decisions, including what they invest in, won't all of a sudden disappear, rewire themselves because you educated, inspired, or entertained them, or even because you were so authentic. Aligned entrepreneurs know this. They don't position themselves as creators. They create all these decisions. We can call them decision architects. And that's why they use their content, their messaging, their emails to lead people to an event. And this could be a live masterclass, a webinar, or even just community events every single week, a 3-day challenge, a secret podcast, or an intentional email sequence. And the point is to continue providing free value, but in this case, in the form of creating an experience, a designated space where the right people who already want your stuff, there's no need for you to force anyone to buy, will be brought face to face with a choice. And of course, we don't leave this to guesswork inside Impact, my membership for purpose-driven entrepreneurs, all around messaging and selling with integrity. One of the ways we did this with one of my students that got him from making almost no money, closing no clients after 6 months of consistently posting multiple times a day, to making around 13,000 euros within the first 90 days of working with me, was creating a webinar. So we looked at a hyper-specific problem that his audience was experiencing and creating a very specific webinar around that. Then we identified the actual subconscious belief that held people back, that caused that problem. And then we designed that experience, that webinar, in a way that my student was able to bring into his audiences, his buyers, conscious, creating light bulb moments that people didn't see before, and they were like, oh, this was what I've been missing, which prompted the right people to book a call and considering buying. Because while everybody else is trying to shove more strategies on down people's throats, add value, trying to give, we want to give in a way that helps people let go. When there's no more resistance, investing in your offer actually becomes easier. And you might think, so Chubby wants me to create all these events and coerce people into buying my stuff. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. Think of it like this. Your soul client is currently stuck because they arrived at an edge of what they are currently capable of creating in their lives. Our brains are wired to protect us. So what they do now is keep consuming content day after day with the same identity, the same set of beliefs. And if all that content is doing is just statements, information, education, which confirm their current beliefs about themselves instead of challenging them, they'll keep agreeing with what you say, leaving comments. They might even be telling you that they really want to buy someday, but they are still at the edge of that cliff. The decision events that we create with my students doesn't force the purchase. It invites a decision. It's saying, here's everything in my power that I can communicate to you about your current situation and the solution that I'm ready to offer you. Will you choose to invest in yourself, jump off that cliff, obviously with me holding your hand, or will you choose to stay at the edge of that cliff, essentially assuming that you can figure it out on your own? Because guess what's going to happen if your messaging never invites people to make that decision, whether it's a yes or a no? Because if you don't engineer decision events that prompt people to actually say a fucking yes or a no to their transformation, guess what's going to happen? Someone else will. But before you go and build this decision event, I want you to sit with this question. Are you comfortable with getting no's? Because the truth is, and the reason why heart-centered, purpose-driven entrepreneurs hide behind constantly providing free content isn't just about having a good heart. It's this deep fear of rejection. What if people say no? That's what my upcoming video is going to talk about, because the truth is, the type of people that your content attracts is a reflection of who you are speaking to. So who do you think you will keep attracting if you constantly talk about the next thing that they have to consider, inspire them, share the next vulnerable story that might make them have some sort of emotions, relate to you, but never essentially buy, and then you get burnt out, you start resenting your audience, because the very reason you started this whole thing wasn't just to provide free content for hours, it's to help change lives. Which is why inside my world, we don't just talk about this at the level of theory. So the student of mine who was able to make over 13,000 euros in the first 90 days of working with me wasn't just because of these events. We engineered these decision events on purpose, with intention. The reason my student was making over 13,000 euros in the first 90 days wasn't because he was educating more or because he was so inspiring with his story. He was, first of all, removing the resistance that he knew his audience had to the transformation. And with this experience, he created this safe container where his people could experience him, feel the shift, and then decide. And I believe, and again, I talked about this in a previous video, this human touch of creating experiences, building communities, building ways for people to get a taste of who you are as a person, not just something that AI can replicate, is going to be your advantage. Because everyone can now use AI to generate more posts, create more consistently, and even send more emails. But not everyone will have the courage and the discipline to put together and show up on a webinar, a masterclass, a workshop, or anywhere else where people will actually have to make a fucking decision. Create an experience where people will actually feel what it's like to be in your energy. Get access to your genius and a bit of a taster of what it would feel like to be working with you in your paid container. Create a community experience where your people won't just feel safer because they are finally going to be among other people that they share struggles with, and that neuroscience shows generates more oxytocin, more happiness hormones. They'll also see some of their peers taking the courage and invest. Humans being humans, social animals, will also incentivize them to consider taking that leap of faith. And that's the difference between content you create that just floats around on your audience's feed, many times temporarily, and content that leads them to a real, actual decision that has the potential to transform their lives. Essentially, the difference between what I call self-serving content that helps you feel important, feel like people are taking your advice, come back to you, listen to your stories. And I know, I've been there. It hurt realizing this. And content that serves others. People who don't want to spend the rest of their life scrolling, they actually already want the solution. They just need that next step. And the choice is absolutely yours. And if you want to dive deeper into how this all works and what is even messaging that we can weave into our content, we have weekly events, sometimes a live, sometimes a workshop inside my free community for purpose-driven entrepreneurs, coaches, mentors, guides, the Breakthrough Alchemist. You can check out the first link below. Join us for conversations on how you can use your mission, your values, your truth, and everything unique about you for your advantage to create the business, working with people that light you up working with, creating a difference in the world. And let me know in the comments, what do you think about organizing an event, a workshop, a webinar? What's the first thought that comes up? And thank you so much again for getting to the end of the video. Truly appreciate your attention. I don't take this lightly, and hope to see you in another one.